Hi, sacred souls. I'm Mademoiselle Sugar Rondeau, and welcome back to the Truth About Intimacy, where intimacy becomes the embodiment of divine love. Let's remember something before we get started, okay? Intensity is not intimacy. Obsession is not intimacy. And today, I want to add something else. Love does not automatically mean compatibility. Once again, with my disclaimer, this series is not intended to encourage blame towards yourself, your parents, caregivers, current or former partners. Understanding human behavior is about awareness, not blame. I would love for you to grant humanity good, bad, complicated, and imperfect to yourself and those you've entrusted with intimacy, without excusing harm or removing accountability. With that being said, some people learned how to communicate. Some learned how to withdraw, pursue, please, or disappear. Many of us have been more than one of these people at different times. At least for a fact, I know that I have. So today, sacred souls, we are exploring a question more complicated than whether two people love each other. Are they actually compatible enough to experience healthy intimacy together? Today's episode is, you may love each other, but are you actually compatible? I hope that many of you understand that you are not just one version of yourself. Don't ever box yourself in that way. We may recognize ourselves in more than one attachment pattern across our lives and our relationships. You can feel secure in one dynamic and anxious and guarded in another. So instead of asking, what is my attachment style? Ask, what happens to my attachment system in this particular relationship? And perhaps, who do I become inside this relationship? I want to get personal with you for a second, so I hope you don't mind. Once upon a time in my life, when I operated from what I now recognize as dismissive avoidant attachment pattern. This was because growing up, I had basic things a child and teenager needed, but emotionally, I did not experience people constantly investing in me. Without realizing, I carried all of that emotional absence into my adult relationships. Every time I committed to someone, which was very, very rare, I became physically uncomfortable. I mean, like quite literally, you guys. I would get nauseous. I never felt settled. As a matter of fact, in my first marriage, when I was getting married, I actually vomited on the way to the courthouse. Second time after the wedding, I vomited and no one even knew I was gone. Anything that required too much of my time, my presence, or emotional energy made me pull away. Yet I was always perfectly willing, just like a dismissive avoidant, to receive those things from others. When intimacy required reciprocity to become emotionally present, invest, and allow myself to be truly known, oh my goodness, I totally avoided it. Without understanding what I was doing, I sabotaged so many relationships. It was until after my second marriage I began recognizing my patterns. By this time, I was in my late 20s and I understood something needed to change. So I began becoming more secure, even when I didn't have the language for it. Eventually, I removed physical intimacy from the equation. Now, this was after my second marriage, or should I say my second divorce. This time I had no physical connection to distract me. I realized how deeply at that time I craved emotional closeness. But what did I do instead? I stayed busy. I went to school. I worked all the time, any and all extra projects. Oh my goodness, you can call on me. Dating and dating serially. Eventually, all of that movement, all of that noise, it became isolation. But in that isolation, it made me sit with myself. It was in that silence I understood what I had been looking for. I didn't simply want attention. I experienced attention. I didn't simply want desire. I had experienced desire. I wanted devotion, not worship, not submission, not losing myself in another person. See, because devotion to me is the reciprocal investment of time, presence, emotional energy, care, and intention. I realized that for much of my earlier life, I wanted people to invest in me in ways I had never learned to invest in them. Intimacy wasn't simply about finding someone willing to give me what I wanted. I also had to become someone capable of giving it. Attachment patterns are not life sentences. I want to repeat that. Attachment patterns are not life sentences. We can become aware. We can learn. We can change. I know that because I did. But becoming capable of intimacy does not automatically make us compatible with everyone that we love. Love says, I have deep feelings for you. Attachment says, I have formed a bond with you, and your presence of absence or your presence or absence affects me. Intimacy says, I am willing to know you and allow myself to be known by you. Compatibility asks, can who you are and who I am realistically coexist without either of us chronically abandoning ourselves? And then there's devotion. Devotion says, are we both willing to consistently invest in what we're building? See, you can love someone and be compatible. You can be intensely attached without genuine intimacy. You can have extraordinary chemistry with someone whose life is incompatible with yours. And someone can look compatible on paper while being unwilling to invest in building a relationship. So let's look at how it is exhibited through different attachment styles. And these are how the attachment styles tend to collide. An anxious attachment and an avoidant attachment. One moves closer to feel safe, while the other moves away to feel safe. Both may use strategies that make the other feel unsafe. Then you have anxious and anxious. Emotional closeness can become enmeshment when each person's emotional state become overly independent on the other. Should I say overly dependent? Let me get that right. And then you have two, avoidance. See, intimacy with them, it's a little different because independence can feel comfortable, but can two people coexist peacefully while remaining emotionally accessible? The absence of conflict does not automatically mean the presence of intimacy. Then there's the fearful avoidant dynamics. Someone may deeply desire intimacy while simultaneously fearing it. Understanding behavior does not require tolerating harmful behavior. We have to always remember something, and that is attachment. It's not an excuse, because your attachment style may explain why intimacy feels difficult. It does not give you permission to feel or make intimacy for someone else feel unsafe. Now that is where we have to draw the line, because attachment can explain. It does not absolve you of the responsibilities of it, of the consequences of it. The intimacy cycle looks a little bit something like this. Someone gets triggered, then there's room for interpretation. Then there's protection. Then there's reaction. Then there's the partner's trigger. Then there's the partner's protection. It is tiresome for both parties. Eventually, protection can become provocation. The strategy you use to protect yourself may provoke the exact behavior you fear. I want to repeat that. The strategy you use to protect yourself may provoke the exact behavior you fear. Ask yourself, who do I become when I feel unsafe? What does my protection strategy feel like to the person trying to love me? You have to look at it sometimes from another person's perspective. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky for some people if you aren't careful. You have to ask yourself, are you being triggered, or are you two just simply incompatible? Not every difference is an attachment wound, you guys, okay? Some differences are simply just differences, and love does not erase them. A healthy compromise asks both parties to move. Chronic self-abandonment asks one person to disappear. It is the compatibility that determines whether two lives can realistically fit together. Intimacy determines how deeply those people can meet within the life they're building. Devotion determines whether both are willing to keep tending to what they have created. But, you can interrupt the cycle. Not everybody may agree with what I'm going to say, and that's fine, but you really can interrupt the cycle. Because the goal of a healthy intimacy, a healthy intimate life with another on a romantic level, is not finding someone who never triggers you. It is creating relationships where activation can be communicated, understood, repaired, and transformed. Closeness says, now this is going back to episode 1 with the 5 C's. Closeness says, can we remain connected without consuming each other? Communication says, can I tell you what's happening inside of me? Compassion says, can I understand your experience without excusing harm? Commitment says, are we both participating? But conflict resolution says, can we repair our wounds? Needs and differences collide. Attachment asks, am I safe? Intimacy asks, can I be known? Compatibility asks, can we realistically build together? And then devotion asks, will we consistently participate in creating and protecting what it is that we're building? Before I close, I want to say this. Sometimes two people can love each other deeply, but do not yet have the skills to love each other safely. Sometimes skills can be learned, wounds can heal, and patterns changed. But sometimes what we're calling a relationship problem is actually a compatibility problem. Wisdom is learning to recognize the difference. I recently dealt with someone that I cared about a lot, and he is a mixture of fearful and dismissive, avoidant. And this relationship, which really it was not, he and I just known each other for a very long time, but I'm just going to use that loosely. It was different in ways that I felt like I was facing myself all over again, and I found myself being triggered. I found myself at times not being secure, and I am pretty much a secure attachment now that I've gotten over some of those issues that I had. I found myself being anxious all the time. Even when I was calm, I was still anxious. I still had a lingering question because I needed that reassurance. I needed to know that I wasn't going to be abandoned. And I understood him too. But once I understood him, I decided I had to walk away. Because by that point, I tried everything that I could. And you can try all you want to with a person who has different attachment styles that don't really match yours, or they aren't really secure. There's always one person that's a little bit more secure than the other. I don't care who says what. Somebody has some type of insecurity. And that's okay. We're human. We're supposed to have those. It's how we handle it that makes the big difference. It was then when I walked away, I slept really good every night. Really, I'm talking about sleeping throughout the night like I never did before. I found my peace again. I found myself not having to worry about someone who I felt was consistently making a choice despite all the education that I have provided, so that he can become better for himself, number one, and for his children. And hopefully, maybe one day, maybe for me. So dealing with an avoidant or who has one of these attachment styles, it's not easy. So I want you guys to understand that I know, I understand, and I've been there. So with that said, I want to leave you with a sacred blessing. May you have the wisdom to recognize the difference between a wound asking to be healed and a truth asking to be accepted. May you never, ever, ever mistake abandoning yourself for the compromise required to love another. May you find relationships where love is accompanied by compatibility, intimacy, is protected by trust and devotion. Oh, real, true devotion is freely and reciprocally given. And may every sacred soul listening have the courage to choose connections where they can be deeply known, authentically loved, and fully themselves. Until we meet again in episode 4, Sacred Souls. Be blessed.